Have you ever felt the heavy burden of family expectations, caught between doing what's expected of you and pursuing your own happiness? This is a story that explores just that dilemma, where a woman finds herself struggling with the care of a stubborn father-in-law while her personal life slowly falls apart. What her husband ultimately reveals and how she manages to turn things around will not only shock you, but also inspire you deeply. Stay with us until the end as we uncover the unexpected twist that changed everything and the powerful lesson it holds for us all. Before we dive into the details, if you enjoy this video, please consider liking it. Your support helps me share valuable life lessons, and if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you do so and hit the bell so you never miss a new video. If you like this content, comment "healthy life" below, and if not, comment "unhealthy" so I can improve. Now, let's get into the story. In their youth, my father-in-law and mother-in-law were both dedicated teachers in their rural village, spending their lives educating children in a small community. When they retired, they spent the first 6 months adjusting to a slower, more peaceful routine at home, enjoying the simple things like raising chickens together, an activity that brought them closer. Their combined pension, amounting to over 10,000 yuan, was more than enough to meet their daily needs, allowing them to live comfortably in the countryside. Despite the contentment of their rural life, my mother-in-law often expressed a quiet longing for something more. She had always dreamed of living in the city, a wish she carried with her for many years. One day, she shared this desire with my father-in-law, hoping to experience life in a county town during their later years. My father-in-law, ever supportive of her wishes and understanding how much this dream meant to her, immediately agreed. With the help of relatives, they bought a modest 60-square-meter second-hand house in the town. Excited for this new chapter, they moved to the city and soon embraced the rhythm of urban life. Their days were filled with simple pleasures and companionship. In the mornings, they would visit a local mahjong parlor to play with new friends. In the afternoons, they would rest in the comfort of their new home, and in the evenings they joined other seniors in the park for lively square dancing. Their days were filled with joy and contentment, savoring the peaceful pace of life. But just as they were beginning to enjoy their retirement years, fate struck with unexpected cruelty. In the second year after their move to the city, while shopping for clothes at a nearby mall, my mother-in-law was tragically hit by a truck while crossing the street. Despite being rushed to the hospital and undergoing emergency care for over 2 hours, the doctors couldn't save her. The loss was devastating for my father-in-law, who was left in a state of shock, his spirit deeply shattered. My mother-in-law had borne 3 sons, with my husband being the eldest. He was the only one who hadn't pursued higher education and now made a living through farming. The other 2 sons had gone to university and settled in the provincial capital for work. After their mother's sudden passing, the 3 brothers discussed how best to care for their elderly father. They decided to give him the choice of living with one of them in their homes, so he wouldn't be alone in his old age. However, my father-in-law firmly rejected the idea of moving in with any of his sons. He was a man of deep-rooted independence, someone who valued his autonomy even in his later years. The thought of leaving the home he had shared with his wife for so many years and becoming dependent on his children was something he couldn't accept. When he learned about his son's discussions, he expressed his anger and disappointment. Despite his children's insistence, my father-in-law was resolute. He said, "I appreciate your concern, but I am still capable of taking care of myself. I do not want to become a burden. Let me stay here in my own home, and you can visit me during holidays. That will be enough." This was a difficult moment for my husband, the middle son, who deeply cared for his father, but knew how stubborn he could be. His love and concern for his father's well-being were overwhelming, but so was his father's refusal to leave his home. However, my husband could never fully accept his father's decision. Every now and then, he would visit his father to check on him and ensure he was okay. Yet, each time he did, his father would greet him at the door with his usual resistance, saying, "You don't need to keep coming here. Go back home to your family and your work. I'm fine. I have everything I need here. No matter how many times my husband heard this, he couldn't help but return to see his father. On each visit, he would bring something, groceries, a meal, or some fruit. But his father would always decline the offerings. "I don't need anything," he would say, his stubborn pride never wavering. Despite the repeated rejections, my husband never stopped checking in. His visits became a regular part of his routine, motivated by his love and concern. Over time, however, it became clear that this stubborn independence was both a gift and a curse. My father-in-law's refusal to accept help meant he remained in a state of isolation, even when his family desperately wanted to be there for him. Eventually, my husband realized that the true challenge wasn't just about convincing his father to move in with them. The real issue lay in the balance between respecting his father's independence and ensuring his safety and happiness. My husband's dedication to his father's well-being was constant, but the realization began to dawn that sometimes love means letting go of control and accepting that certain things are beyond your reach. The situation became a turning point for my husband, one that would influence the way he saw his own life and responsibilities. The experience taught him the power of empathy and the importance of respecting the choices of those we love, even when those choices lead to pain or frustration. It became clear that the lesson wasn't about convincing his father to change his mind, but about learning to support him from a distance, with respect for his autonomy. This story, though deeply personal, serves as a powerful reminder for all of us about the importance of independence, the strength of family bonds, and the delicate balance we must maintain between duty and happiness. For a while, my husband and I lived in a sort of delicate balance with his father, where each side expressed care but in very different ways. My father-in-law, though receiving help from us, remained insistent that he didn't need any of it. He would say, take it all. I don't need any of it. Take it back, my pantry's full. I'm not lacking anything here." It was an ongoing back and forth, a push and pull that defined our days. My husband and his father never fully gave in to each other, but they both understood the strong connection they shared. As the situation continued, it became apparent that something needed to change. The family came together for a serious discussion. My husband, feeling the strain that this ongoing arrangement was causing, suggested, "Dad, our family is the least well off, but why don't you come live with us? We can make it work somehow." His two brothers were quick to agree, with one of them saying, "Yes, brother, you take Dad. We'll stay out of it and won't cause any trouble." After careful consideration, the three brothers concluded that it would make the most sense for my husband to take on the responsibility of caring for their father, as they lived in the same area and had better access to transportation. Eventually, after much persuasion, my father-in-law reluctantly agreed to the arrangement, and so he moved into our home. However, even then, things didn't become any easier. My father-in-law, while agreeing to stay with us, remained stubborn and difficult to please. No matter what we did to accommodate him, nothing seemed to satisfy him, and the tension in the house grew heavier every day. Our once peaceful home began to feel oppressive, like we were constantly walking on eggshells around him. If it weren't for my deep commitment to my husband and our marriage, I honestly would have preferred not to have my father-in-law living with us at all. The burden of this new arrangement quickly became evident. Since the day my father-in-law moved in, he didn't contribute a single penny to the household expenses. He stopped paying for rent, water, electricity, gas, leaving us to bear the full financial burden. Every basic necessity, from rice to oil to salt, fell on my shoulders, and the weight of these responsibilities began to overwhelm me. Despite all our best efforts, it seemed nothing we did could please him. The strain this placed on our marriage and family life was immense. He followed a strict daily routine that he adhered to with precision. He ate at the same times every day, went to bed at the same hour each night, and refused to participate in any household chores. His behavior went beyond just being set in his ways. He was quick-tempered and stubborn, never willing to listen to any advice from either my husband or me. One incident stands out as a vivid example of his obstinance. One day, my son, eager to show respect, took a glass of water to his grandfather. He offered it with the best of intentions, hoping to help. But when my father-in-law took the glass, he didn't even acknowledge my son's gesture. In a sharp, dismissive tone, he said, "I didn't ask you to bring me water. Are you just being redundant?" My son stood there in stunned silence, hurt by the remark. The look on his face, disappointed and confused, was heartbreaking for me. My husband, aware of the ongoing tension, had several earnest conversations with his father, hoping to bridge the gap and encourage a more considerate attitude. But despite his efforts, my father-in-law's demeanor remained unchanged. The lack of empathy and understanding only deepened the strain between us, leaving both my husband and me feeling helpless and disheartened. Over time, my feelings toward my father-in-law shifted dramatically. What had once been a tolerable trait, his stubbornness, now felt like a personal affront, one that deepened the rift between us. I found myself growing increasingly distant, less patient, and more frustrated. This didn't go unnoticed by him. In turn, his behavior became even more antagonistic and uncooperative, which only worsened the situation. The atmosphere in our home became unbearably tense. Every interaction felt awkward, and even the simplest conversation seemed like a challenge. This uneasy dynamic lingered for months, and it seemed as though things would never improve. Eventually, my husband decided to take our son away for a few days to give me some time alone with my father-in-law. The plan was to provide a brief respite, but instead, it only intensified the discomfort. Without my husband's calming presence and mediation, the situation grew even more trying. My father-in-law's unwillingness to cooperate with me left me feeling increasingly isolated and frustrated. In search of a solution, I reached out to my brother-in-law for help. I asked if he could take my father-in-law into his home for a few days to give me a much-needed break from the tense environment. I hoped that a temporary change of scenery would help us all to regroup. My brother-in-law agreed to the plan and came over the next day to help with the move. However, when he arrived, he found that my father-in-law wasn't willing to leave. He refused to move until my husband returned. My brother-in-law had no choice but to leave without accomplishing anything. When my husband came back, I explained the situation to him. To my relief, he didn't blame me for the inconvenience. Instead, he asked me to be more patient with his father. Despite his supportive words, I couldn't shake the feeling of discomfort. The atmosphere at home had become so strained, and even though I tried to carry on, the tension felt unbearable. It was clear that things couldn't continue like this forever. Yet, we were stuck in this pattern, struggling to find a way to ease the burden that my father-in-law's presence had created in our home. The tension in our home was becoming unbearable. Although my husband never directly expressed his frustration, I could feel the strain in every interaction. The added responsibilities, combined with the unspoken discomfort, left me drained. It felt like I was constantly carrying a weight, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to shake it off. Maintaining any sense of normalcy seemed impossible, and I found myself overwhelmed by the constant pressure. One day, after yet another exhausting stretch, I finally reached my breaking point. I decided it was time for a heart-to-heart with my husband. We sat down, and I opened up about how I was feeling. I told him, "I can't keep doing this. I don't think I can continue living with your father. It's just too much for me to handle. What if I took our child and moved out?" His face darkened immediately, and I could tell he was struggling with what I had said. But he didn't say anything. The silence between us hung heavy, leaving me uncertain about his thoughts. The following day, my husband took it upon himself to speak with his father. I didn't know the details of their conversation, but I could sense a shift in the air. A few days later, my father-in-law approached us with an unexpected decision. He had decided to move in with my brother-in-law. The moment I heard this, I felt a huge sense of relief. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The tension that had lingered for so long began to dissolve, and for the first time in ages, I felt a sense of calm settling in our home. But this new peace came with its own set of challenges. I found myself becoming increasingly irritable with my husband. Little things started to bother me, and I couldn't shake the feeling of frustration. Nothing he did seemed right, and my responses to him grew colder over time. It felt like there was a growing distance between us, and instead of the harmony I had hoped for, we seemed to be drifting further apart. The emotional gap between us widened, and the connection we once shared seemed to fade. One day, without warning, my husband turned to me and said something that hit me like a bolt of lightning. "Do you think this situation has helped anyone? You're always blaming others, but you haven't done anything for me or for our child. I don't feel like you want me to be happy." His words stunned me. It was a wake-up call, and for the first time I saw the situation through his eyes. He was right. I had been harboring resentment, not just toward my father-in-law, but also toward my husband. I had been allowing external factors to fuel my discontent, but in truth, my unhappiness was largely a result of how I had been approaching our marriage and our family life. The realization was painful, but it was also exactly what I needed to hear. The departure of my father-in-law hadn't magically solved all of our problems. My dissatisfaction with my husband remained, and I knew I had to take responsibility for my role in it. It became clear that I needed to make some changes within myself, starting with my attitude toward our relationship. I began to reflect on my own actions and mindset. I asked myself, have I been part of the problem? Determined to make things better, I started working on being more affectionate and understanding with my husband and our child. Slowly, I noticed the change. It didn't happen overnight, but gradually, our relationship began to improve. The tension in the house began to dissipate, and it was as if we had found a way back to the warmth and happiness that had once defined our marriage. Disagreements still happened, of course, but now we were able to resolve them more quickly. The love and understanding between us deepened, and the feelings of dissatisfaction and resentment that had once consumed me faded away. I began to appreciate life and our family dynamics again. It felt like a weight had been lifted, and I started to see the good in our lives more clearly. As time went on, I noticed a shift in my father-in-law's behavior toward me. The coldness that had once defined our relationship began to melt, replaced by a more genuine warmth and concern. He would occasionally check in on us, something that signaled his desire to reconnect. This change made me reflect deeply on the nature of relationships and the importance of mutual understanding. I realized that the key to a fulfilling life doesn't lie in the perfect circumstances or in getting everything we want. It lies in the relationships we nurture, in the compassion we offer, and in the way we choose to respond to each other. When we let go of our rigid positions and embrace empathy, we create deeper, more meaningful connections with the people around us. By investing in these relationships, we foster an environment where love, harmony, and contentment can thrive. This journey taught me that living well involves more than just accepting the flaws in others. It's about actively engaging with them in a spirit of compassion and understanding. Life is full of challenges, but it's the way we face them together that shapes our happiness. If you've made it this far in the video, I want to thank you for your time and attention. I hope this story has given you a fresh perspective on the complexities of family relationships and the power of personal growth. We all go through tough times, but it's how we respond that makes the difference. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What's one lesson you've taken away from this story that you plan to put into practice in your own life? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts with me. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire, uplift, and motivate. Together, we can create a community of understanding and growth. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Keep striving for a life full of compassion, connection, and happiness.